Today, the United States has military bases in more than 80 countries. That means American soldiers are stationed on almost every corner of Earth. From Germany to Japan, from South Korea to Qatar. They're in the deserts, the jungles, the frozen north, and tiny islands you've never even heard of. So here's the real question. How did one nation end up policing the entire planet? And more importantly, who gave it that power? Zoom out, really far. You're now looking at a world map, and every glowing dot is a US military base. There are more than 750 of them. Some are tiny outposts, a few hundred soldiers, a radar dish, a runway. Others are full-scale cities with schools, hospitals, and movie theaters, and enough firepower to level a small country. US troops are stationed closer to North Korea than most South Koreans. They're inside Africa, the Middle East, and Eastern Europe. Even countries that publicly criticize America often quietly host its soldiers. This isn't an empire in the old sense. No flags, no colonies. But it is something new. An empire built from runways and radar stations. So how did this happen? Simple. It started with the biggest war in human history. In 1945, the world was in ruins. Europe was shattered. Japan was flattened. Tens of millions were dead. Entire cities had been erased. Factories were rubble. Railroads were twisted metal. Governments had collapsed. But one country came out richer, stronger, and completely untouched. The United States. While everyone else was digging through ruins, America was building factories. While Europe was rationing food, America was exporting steel. While Asia was trying to survive, America was loaning money. The US didn't just win the war. It became the banker, the builder, and the bodyguard of half the planet. And then something important happened. The old European empires collapsed. Britain, France, the Netherlands. They could no longer control their colonies, so a massive power vacuum opened. And America stepped in, not with flags, but with money. Not with colonies, but with bases. The US didn't just defeat Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. It replaced them. And it realized something powerful. If you want to control the world, you don't need to occupy it. You just need to stand nearby. So America did something no empire had ever done before. It built permanent military bases inside other countries, not to conquer them, but to protect them. Or at least, that's how it was sold. Then came the Cold War. The Soviet Union was spreading communism, and America was terrified, not just of invasion, but of losing influence. Because if countries turned communist, they wouldn't trade with the US. They wouldn't buy American goods. They wouldn't listen to Washington. So America made a deal with dozens of countries. We'll protect you if you let us stay. Germany said yes. Japan said yes. South Korea said yes. Italy said yes. Turkey said yes. And suddenly, American troops weren't just in America. They were everywhere. Each base became a chess piece. Not to attack, but to surround. From the Soviet perspective, it looked like they were being boxed in. American planes, American missiles, American soldiers, all closer and closer to their borders. So the Soviets asked, are we being protected or encircled? The answer was yes. That paranoia never went away, and it still shapes Russia's behavior today. Then America created NATO, a military alliance with Europe. On paper, it was about defense. In reality, it was about permanent presence. Once NATO was formed, US troops were guaranteed to stay inside Europe forever. And once your soldiers are on someone else's soil, you don't just defend them, you influence them. Their politics, their wars, their enemies. When a country depends on your military, it starts listening to your opinions. Slowly, America became something new. Not just a country, but a security provider. If you wanted protection, you called Washington. And when you called Washington, Washington expected something back. Let's slow down for a moment, because American power isn't just about where soldiers are. It's about what happens when America decides someone is a problem. Imagine you're a small country. You don't have nukes, you don't have a navy, you don't have powerful friends, but you do have something valuable: oil, a shipping lane, a mineral, a location. And then one day, you annoy Washington. Maybe you raise prices. Maybe you change governments. Maybe you stop listening. You don't get invaded right away. First, your bank accounts freeze. Then your ships get inspected. Then your economy starts choking. Because global trade runs through American-controlled systems. This is what it means to live in a world where one country protects the roads. They also decide who gets to use them. Let me give you a real example. In 2012, Iran tried to sell oil. But the US said no, not with bombs, not with soldiers, with finance. Banks that handled Iranian money were cut off from the US dollar, and the dollar is the blood of global trade. So suddenly, no one wanted to buy Iranian oil. Not because they didn't need it, but because America controlled the system that moved the money. That is power. Not loud, but absolute. This is why even countries that criticize America still quietly cooperate. They may disagree, they may complain, but they don't disconnect. Because leaving the system is like jumping off a highway at full speed. And this is why US bases matter so much. They're not just military, they're a reminder. America is here. America is watching. America can reach you. Now you understand why Russia and China act the way they do. They don't see a friendly policeman. They see a net closing. Bases in Europe, bases in Asia, ships in the Pacific, missiles in the Middle East. From their perspective, America is everywhere because it is trying to stay on top. Not forever, but long enough. Now here's the part most people miss. Those bases? They're not just about war, they're about trade. More than 90% of global trade moves by sea: food, oil, phones, clothes, medicine. All of it moves on ships, and those ships travel through oceans protected by the US Navy. America patrols the world's shipping lanes, which means it controls the world's supply lines. If the US decides a country is a problem, it doesn't have to invade. It can just stop their ships. That's what sanctions really are. Not laws, but naval power backed by economic pressure. So when Washington says blockade, the world listens. Because if ships stop moving, everything stops. That is power. Quiet power. There's one more layer to America's global reach, and it's more powerful than any aircraft carrier: the dollar. Most international trade doesn't use euros. It doesn't use yuan. It doesn't use rubles. It uses US dollars. Oil is priced in dollars. Food is priced in dollars. Ships are insured in dollars. Loans are written in dollars. Which means every country on Earth needs access to the American financial system. And who controls that system? Washington. If the US decides a country is a threat, it doesn't have to fire a missile. It can just turn off the money. Banks get locked out. Payments stop going through. Imports freeze. Exports collapse. The country doesn't explode. It suffocates. This is what economists call financial warfare. But it only works because the US Navy protects the trade routes that keep the dollar powerful. The ships, the oil, the ports. All of it moves through a world secured by American firepower. Which means the dollar isn't just paper. It's backed by bases. This is why every time a country tries to break away, it runs into trouble. When Iraq tried to sell oil outside the dollar system, it became a target. When Iran tried to do it, its economy collapsed. When Russia tried, its banks were frozen. Not because those countries were saints, but because they tried to exit the system. And the system does not like exits. Because if too many countries leave, the dollar weakens. And if the dollar weakens, America's power shrinks. So the bases remain. The ships patrol. The system stays locked. Now you can see the loop. Bases protect trade. Trade strengthens the dollar. The dollar funds the military. The military builds more bases. Round and round it goes. Not because of some secret plan, but because the machine feeds itself. That's why even when wars end, the system keeps running. Because shutting it down would break everything. After 9/11, America's global network went into full use. Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Africa. Drones didn't have to fly from the US. They took off from bases built decades earlier. Planes, missiles, special forces, all operating from a web that spanned the planet. This wasn't chaos. It was design. The US didn't need new empires. It already had the infrastructure of one. But there's a price. Countries that host US bases become targets. They lose independence. Their enemies become America's enemies. And sometimes they get dragged into wars they never chose. America isn't everywhere because it loves the world. It's everywhere because it built a system that can't be turned off, a system where global stability depends on American firepower. So when you see American soldiers halfway across the planet, you're not seeing chaos. You're seeing the aftershock of World War II, a war that never really ended. It just went global. If this changed how you see power, welcome to Arcane Bureau. Because every week we expose the hidden systems that shape our world long after the headlines move on. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next story.